The cold steel walls of the prison transport vibrated with the low hum of the ship's massive engines, but Master Sergeant John Reaper Kane paid them no mind. He sat with his back against the bulkhead, wrists bound in alien restraints that pulsed with an eerie blue light, his body sore from the beating his captors had delivered. They thought pain would break him. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Across the dimly lit chamber, 6 other men sat in similar restraints, their uniforms torn and burned but their eyes still sharp. Marines, SEALs, Delta, Force Recon, some of the deadliest warriors the United States had ever produced. Kane had fought alongside men like them before, and he knew the look of soldiers who hadn't given up. They weren't defeated. They were waiting. The Empire soldiers, a scaled and multi-limbed species called the Yaga, patrolled the chamber with an air of condescension. They had underestimated humanity since the war began. Their mistake. Kane had seen what a single determined man could do with nothing but willpower and opportunity. These aliens, with all their advanced technology, had no idea what was coming. The Yaga commander stepped forward, his angular form casting a shadow against the sterile white glow of the overhead lights. His mandibles clicked in irritation as he stopped in front of Kane. "Your species is weak," the alien said in heavily accented English. "You do not belong in this war." Kane slowly lifted his head, dark eyes locking onto the alien's black, insect-like gaze. "That why you had to jump us in the dark?" His voice was hoarse, but the smirk on his bloodied lips was unmistakable. "Afraid to fight us head-on?" The Yaga commander hissed, mandibles flaring. One of his guards stepped forward, a long, crackling stun baton in his claws. The alien raised it, but before the strike could land, a voice cut through the tension. "You should probably reconsider that." Kane turned his head slightly. The speaker was Lieutenant Cole Ramirez, a Marine sniper with a quiet intensity and the kind of precision that could put a bullet through a man's eye at 1.5 miles. His dark skin was bruised from the earlier fight, but his expression was calm, collected. The Yaga commander studied him. "And why is that?" Ramirez's smile was slow, deliberate. "Because the last guy who tried got his neck snapped." The alien hesitated. It was true. A Yaga interrogator had gotten too close to one of the prisoners, a wiry Delta operator named Briggs, underestimating human reflexes. The result had been a corpse with its windpipe crushed. The aliens had been more cautious since then, but arrogance still shrouded their every move. The Yaga commander exhaled sharply through his mandibles and turned away, signaling for his guards to hold. "You will all break soon enough," he growled. Kane watched him leave, waiting until the doors sealed shut before exhaling. The room remained silent for a few moments before another voice spoke up, this one thick, with a southern drawl. "Well, that was downright hospitable," said Sergeant First Class Marcus Boone, a towering green beret with a frame built for breaking things. "Should send him a thank-you note." Across from him, Briggs chuckled. "I'll carve it into their damn ship when we take it from them." Kane took a slow breath, rolling his shoulders. Every man in this room had been trained to endure captivity, to resist interrogation. But survival wasn't enough. They needed a plan. "How many guards outside?" Kane asked. Ramirez shifted slightly. 6 rotating patrols, plus whatever security system they've got on lockdown. Kane nodded. "They're overconfident. They don't see us as a threat." Briggs scoffed. "Yeah, tell that to the guy I choked out." "They see that as a fluke," Kane countered. "They still think we're just animals lashing out." "That's good. That's an advantage." He turned his head slightly toward Ramirez. "You still got eyes for weak points." Ramirez tilted his chin toward the far wall. "That panel near the vent. They've got a power conduit running under it. Might be a manual bypass." Boone grunted. "You saying we can cut the power?" "Maybe," Ramirez admitted. "But we need something to get to it." Kane's mind worked quickly. They didn't have weapons, but weapons weren't the only way to fight a war. "We're gonna watch, wait, find patterns. When they slip up, we move." Briggs exhaled sharply. "And then what?" "We're still locked in a floating cell." "We don't need to take the ship," Kane said. "We just need to make them afraid of us." A silence settled over the men. Then Boone grinned. "Damn, I like the sound of that. A sudden metallic hiss filled the chamber as the door slid open again. A new figure stepped inside, this one different from the Yaga. Tall, wiry, with deep-set black eyes and pale, almost translucent skin. A member of the Vel Dominion, the Empire's intelligence caste. The alien's gaze moved over the prisoners with slow, measured intent before settling on Kane. "You," it said in a voice both calm and unnerving. "We have studied you." Kane lifted an eyebrow. "Hope you liked what you saw." The Vel stepped closer, his dark eyes narrowing. "You are an anomaly. Your kind fights beyond the expected limits. That is troublesome." Kane smirked. "For you, yeah." The Vel studied him a moment longer, then inclined its head. "We will see." Then, just as quickly as it had arrived, the alien turned and left, the door sealing behind it. Boone exhaled. "I don't like that one." Kane's smirk faded, his mind already piecing together what that encounter meant. The Empire was starting to realize its mistake. That was good, because it meant they were running out of time. The Yaga guards patrolled with the same arrogant strut, their insectoid limbs clacking against the cold floor. They barely spared a glance at the prisoners, still convinced that human defiance was little more than an inconvenience. Kane counted every step, every shift change, every flicker of distraction in their alien faces. He had fought long enough to know when an enemy had grown complacent. That was when they bled the most. He sat cross-legged against the wall, eyes half-lidded, the picture of a man resigned to his fate. In reality, he was listening. Every scrape of movement from his men, every quiet breath, every unspoken message passed between them in a glance. They had been at this for days, watching, learning, adapting. That was what humans did. Ramirez leaned against the far wall, wrists still bound in the glowing cuffs, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "Shift rotations shorter now." "They're nervous." Kane didn't react, keeping his body language relaxed. "Good." Across the room, Boone stretched, rolling his massive shoulders. "Means they know something's up. Question is, how long till they act on it?" Briggs, crouched by the vent, kept his eyes down. "They've still got the Vel watching us. That thing's too damn smart for its own good." Kane exhaled slowly. The Vel agent hadn't returned since their last meeting, but its presence still lingered. Watching, calculating. It knew humans were dangerous, but it didn't know how dangerous. That was the edge they needed. "Tonight," Kane said. The men barely reacted, but he saw it in their eyes. The shift, the cold focus of men who had been waiting for the moment war turned in their favor. Boone cracked his knuckles. Finally, they moved in silence, the kind only trained soldiers could manage. Ramirez had been right. The panel near the vent housed a power conduit, and after hours of watching the guards, they discovered a flaw. The Yaga relied on biometric security, their systems tuned to their physiology. But the humans had been listening to every alien word, every command input. Briggs had even mimicked the subtle throat clicks they used as secondary authentication. Now came the test. Briggs pressed himself against the wall as the Yaga passed, its reptilian gaze barely skimming the room. The moment it turned, Ramirez moved, quiet as a shadow. His fingers flicked against the alien's belt, retrieving the security fob in a motion so fluid it was over before it began. The Yaga kept walking. It had no idea it was already dead. Kane waited 5 seconds. 10. No alarms. No sign of suspicion. He nodded once. Ramirez crossed to the panel, slipping the stolen fob against the reader. The lock flickered, uncertain. Then it clicked open. Briggs was already there, hands moving fast. He pulled the panel free, revealing the exposed wiring. His lips twisted in a satisfied smirk. "Yeah, this'll do." Kane shifted, watching the doors. "How long?" Briggs didn't look up. "I can kill the lights now, but if we want more than a blackout, I'll need time." Kane weighed their options. A total systems failure would be ideal, but if they were going to make a move, they needed to control when and how. Kill the secondary systems. Leave the life support, but make them think it's failing. That'll make them panic. Briggs grinned. "Oh, I like that." He twisted the wires, and the ship shuddered. Across the room, the light dimmed, flickering like a heartbeat on the verge of stopping. The hum of power that had been a constant presence since their capture stuttered, then fell into a sickly, uneven rhythm. The air grew thinner, only slightly, but just enough to make the aliens feel it. The reaction was immediate. The guards outside barked in their guttural language, confusion thick in their voices. Footsteps pounded against metal as they rushed to their stations. Kane let the chaos bloom. Within minutes, a Yargar officer stormed into the chamber, mandibles clicking in agitation. Behind him, 2 guards flanked the entrance, their weapons raised. "What have you done?" the officer snarled. Kane looked up lazily. "You tell me." The officer spun toward his men, snapping orders in his native tongue. One of the guards hesitated, uncertain. The flickering lights, the stuttering oxygen. It was a bad sign for them, too. Boone took his chance. The massive Green Beret lunged, his restraints snapping against his sheer brute force. He didn't need his hands free. He slammed his shoulder into the nearest guard, sending the alien sprawling. Ramirez moved at the same time, his body twisting as he brought his legs up, snapping them around the second guard's arm and wrenching the weapon from its grasp. Kane was already on his feet, his fists lashed out, driving into the officer's throat before he could react. The alien choked, stumbling back, and Kane didn't give him a second chance. He grabbed the stunned Yargar by the mandibles and twisted. The wet snap echoed in the chamber as the alien collapsed. The fight was over in seconds. 3 dead aliens, and now they had weapons. Briggs pulled himself free of the panel, breathing hard. That was fast. Boone grunted. They ain't built for real fights. Kane wiped the blood off his knuckles, his mind already moving forward. We just made our opening. Now we take the ship. No one argued. The plan had been set in motion, and the Empire had no idea what was coming. The silence after the ambush was brief. Kane stood over the fallen Yargar officer, the alien's body still twitching, mandibles frozen in a death grimace. Around him, the other man moved with practiced efficiency, stripping weapons from the dead and securing their positions. The fight had been quick, precise. The next one wouldn't be. Boone knelt beside the nearest corpse, inspecting the plasma rifle he had claimed. He frowned, tilting his head toward Ramirez. "You getting a read on this thing?" Ramirez ran his fingers along the weapon's sleek, segmented casing, eyes narrowing. "Power cells linked to some kind of biometric lock. Looks like they didn't want us using their toys." Briggs scoffed from where he crouched near the exposed panel. "Arrogant bastards thought of everything, except losing." Kane let the words roll over him, his mind already moving ahead. The stolen weapons were useless for now, but the guards outside still thought this room was secure. That was leverage. He looked to Ramirez. "How much time before they check in?" The sniper glanced at the bodies, then at the door. "Judging by the officer's rank, they'll notice his absence within 10 minutes. 15 at most." Kane exhaled slowly. Not much, but enough. He turned to Briggs. "You finish rigging the secondary power." Briggs wiped sweat from his forehead, smudging grime across his cheek. "Yeah. Ship thinks the oxygen scrubbers are failing. Should have M scrambling to fix it." Boone grinned. "Make M think they're suffocating. That's dirty." "Effective," Kane corrected. "Panic makes people stupid. We used that." The ship trembled beneath their feet, a low vibration running through the bulkheads. Kane recognized it immediately. Engine output shifting, minor course correction. Somewhere on the bridge, the command crew was reacting, trying to assess the problem. They were on borrowed time. He turned to his men. "We split up. Boone, Ramirez, you take the vent route. Head for the armory. Briggs and I will secure engineering. If we control life support, we control the ship." Boone rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck. "Hell of a plan." Kane locked eyes with him. "We don't make it off this ship unless we start thinking bigger. If we can't escape, we turn this thing into a fortress." Ramirez nodded. "Give them a reason to fear us." Kane's expression was grim. "They already do." The split was seamless. Ramirez and Boone disappeared into the ventilation system, their movements barely making a sound. Kane and Briggs pressed forward, stepping over the bodies as they moved toward the door. The stolen security fob flickered in Briggs' hand as he ran it over the panel. The door hissed open. The corridor outside was empty. Good. They slipped into the passage, keeping low. Kane kept his breathing steady, ears attuned to every hum and pulse of the ship's failing systems. Somewhere deeper inside, alarms would be tripping, technicians scrambling. The Yaga weren't built for improvisation. They relied on systems, protocols. Kane was counting on that weakness. Briggs motioned ahead. A checkpoint loomed at the end of the corridor. 2 guards standing at attention, their elongated rifles held firm. Kane didn't hesitate. He moved fast, a predator closing the distance before his prey realized the hunt had begun. He was on the first guard in an instant, driving his knee into the alien's midsection before wrapping an arm around its throat. The second guard barely had time to react before Briggs struck low, yanking the Yaga's legs out from under it. The struggle was brief. Kane held tight until the first alien stopped moving. Briggs ended the second with a brutal snap of the neck. Kane exhaled. Move. They slipped through the checkpoint, weaving through the ship's winding corridors. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. The sabotage was working. The life support failures were spreading. Good. They reached engineering in minutes. The entrance was guarded, but the aliens were distracted, focused on the control panels, hissing in agitation as they fought to stabilize the ship's systems. Kane and Briggs didn't give them the chance. They hit hard, silent, striking from the shadows before the Yaga even knew they were there. Kane drove his fist into the nearest alien's throat, seizing its weapon before it could fire. Briggs dispatched another with a single brutal twist, letting the body crumple before yanking a blade from the guard's belt. The remaining crew tried to react, but they were engineers, not warriors. Kane and Briggs tore through them, leaving the control room drenched in silence and alien blood. Briggs wiped his hands on his torn uniform, breathing hard. That's one way to clear a room. Kane was already moving. He approached the control panel, eyes scanning the alien text. He didn't need to read it to know what he was looking for. Power distribution. He toggled the system, rerouting the remaining auxiliary energy. Life support was already compromised, but now he was making it worse, cycling the remaining oxygen unevenly, forcing the ship to choke itself. Briggs grinned. That'll make him sweat. Kane turned away from the controls. Now we hold this room. If we lose engineering, we lose control. Briggs nodded. Hoboon and Ramirez have better luck with the armory. Kane exhaled. They will, because failure wasn't an option. Not anymore. The ship shuddered, a deep, wounded groan reverberating through its metal skeleton. Kane felt the tremor beneath his boots, the uneven hiss of failing life support rattling in the vents above. It was working. The Yaga were losing control, and fear was setting in. He could hear it in the distant echoes of their voices, shouted orders laced with panic. Briggs wiped sweat from his brow, his grip tightening around the blade he had claimed. They're getting desperate. Kane's gaze stayed fixed on the engineering control panel. The Yaga command crew was trying to override his sabotage, but they didn't have the time or the adaptability to counter human problem-solving. He had rerouted power in unpredictable ways, forcing the system into contradictions, making their own ship fight against them. The comm unit on the wall crackled. A guttural voice, thick with static and alien rage, barked through the speaker. Kane didn't speak Yaga, but he knew a threat when he heard one. Briggs smirked. I think they're pissed. Kane's response was to pick up the comm unit and press the transmit button. He didn't say a word. He just breathed. Slow, measured, controlled. The silence stretched. Then, in a voice that was cold steel wrapped in velvet, he spoke. You don't know who I am. He let that sink in. You think I'm just another soldier, just another prisoner. But you've made a mistake. The alien voice barked something unintelligible, but Kane spoke over it, his tone never rising, never breaking. You took me. You put me in a cage. And now, you're watching your ship collapse around you because of it. The silence on the other end was different now. Not just anger. Not just confusion. Fear. Kane let the moment breathe before he delivered the final blow. I am the Baba Yaga. Then he cut the transmission. Briggs let out a low whistle. Damn. Gotta admit, that was dramatic as hell. Kane didn't answer. He was already moving, eyes scanning the control panel for the final piece of the puzzle. The Yaga still had control of navigation. If they wanted to make this victory permanent, they needed to take the bridge. A sharp hiss from the ventilation shaft made them both turn. The grate popped loose, and a pair of hands gripped the edges before Boone hauled himself through. Ramirez followed a moment later, his uniform streaked with alien blood, a plasma rifle slung over his shoulder. Boone grinned. Miss us. Kane eyed the weapons they carried. You hit the armory. Ramirez tossed him a rifle. Stocked up. Also left a few surprises for anyone who goes poking around. Briggs chuckled. Boom. Boone smirked. Boom. Kane checked the weapon, feeling its weight. The Yaga had designed their firearms for creatures with different musculature, but he had spent years adapting to alien weapons. This was no different. He flipped the power cell into place with a practiced motion. We take the bridge. No arguments. No hesitation. They moved. The corridors were chaos. Yaga bodies littered the halls, some gasping for breath in the thin atmosphere. Others collapsed in their final moments of suffocation. The humans moved through the carnage with the cold efficiency of men who had walked battlefields before. The bridge doors loomed ahead, flanked by 2 guards in heavier armor. Kane didn't slow. He raised his rifle, firing in a quick, controlled burst. The plasma tore through the first guard's shoulder, sending it reeling. Boone finished the job, closing the distance and driving a combat knife into the alien's throat. The second guard managed to fire a shot, but Ramirez was faster. He dropped to one knee, lining up a clean shot between the alien's eyes. The body hit the floor with a dull thud. Briggs was already at the controls, prying open the access panel. They locked it down from the inside. Kane gave a single nod. Then we blow it. Boone grinned, stepping forward with a small, round device. He pressed it against the door's surface and flicked a switch. A low hum filled the air. Breach in 3-2. The explosion was controlled, precise. The blast forced the doors apart just enough for them to push through. Kane went first. The bridge was chaos. Officers scrambled, their exoskeletal limbs clicking in frantic movements. The Vel was there, the same alien intelligence that had interrogated Kane days before. It turned sharply, its cold, segmented eyes narrowing. You should not be here, it said, voice unnervingly calm. Kane raised his rifle. Neither should you. The room erupted in violence. Boone and Ramirez took down the nearest officers, while Briggs moved to the navigation controls. The Vel ducked low, moving with unnatural speed. Kane fired, but the alien twisted out of the way, its elongated fingers snapping toward a concealed blade. Kane met it head-on. The fight was brutal. The Vel was faster, more agile, but Kane had fought monsters before. He let the creature overextend, then drove his elbow into its center mass. The alien staggered, and Kane pressed the advantage, striking again, this time shattering one of its mandibles. It hissed, stumbling back. Kane leveled his rifle at its head. Yield. The Vel's eyes flickered, calculating. Then, slowly, it raised its hands. Behind him, Briggs hooped. We've got control. Navigation's ours. Boone grinned, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. So what now, boss? Kane looked down at the Vel, his expression unreadable. Now, he said, we send a message. He turned to the comm panel, opening a frequency to the entire fleet. His voice carried through every channel, reaching every Yaga on board and beyond. This ship belongs to us now. You have 2 choices, run or die here. Silence. Then, from the vast reaches of space, came the unmistakable flicker of retreating vessels. The Yaga fleet, shaken to its core, was breaking. Kane lowered the rifle, exhaling slowly. The fight was over. For now.